Excuse me, officer. Could you tell me why you pulled me over?
Because you're driving a car you clearly can't afford.
What'd you do? Steal it? Tell me why you stole it!
Steal it?
Hand over that bag. Whatever's in there belongs to whoever you robbed to get it.
Look at this train wreck!
She totally deserves it.
Excuse me, officer. Could you tell me why you pulled me over? Hartwell stared at her like she'd said something offensive just by opening her mouth. Because you're driving a car you clearly can't afford. He stepped closer. What did you do? Steal it. Steal it. Wynn said nothing. Hand over that bag. Whatever's in there belongs to whoever you robbed to get it. Someone on the sidewalk laughed. 3 phones went up. A woman whispered something to her friend, and they both smirked. Nobody moved. Nobody said stop. Just a black woman standing under cold flashing lights, getting stripped of her dignity in front of strangers who filmed instead of helped. Hartwell smiled like a man who had never once been wrong. But in just a few minutes, he was going to wish he had never gotten out of that cruiser tonight. To understand why that night mattered so much, you need to know who Wynn Brooks actually was. Not through introduction, through action. Rewind 3 hours before Hartwell's lights ever came on. Wynn was sitting at the far end of a banquet hall at the Georgia State Bar Association's annual dinner. The room was packed with nearly 200 of the state's most respected attorneys, judges, and legal consultants. She had just finished a short address. The applause hadn't fully died down before people were already lining up to hand her their cards. Black blazer, natural hair pinned up, reading glasses pushed on her forehead, a glass of water in her hand. Not wine. She still had to drive. Wynn Brooks, 43 years old, licensed attorney in the state of Georgia, co-founder and COO of Brooks and Sutton Legal Consulting. It was a firm she built from nothing alongside her partner Gloria Sutton 12 years ago. Their clients weren't normal people. They were corporations, local governments. And this detail will matter later, the city of Caldwell Heights itself. Her husband, Reginald Brooks, was a retired federal judge with over 20 years on the bench. In Georgia's legal world, the name Brooks and Sutton didn't need explaining. At 9:08 p.m., Wynn said her goodbyes and walked out to the parking lot. Her black SUV was waiting. Leather portfolio on the passenger seat. Half-finished coffee, still warm in the cup holder. Phone already synced to Bluetooth. She settled in, started the engine, let the jazz run. She wasn't rushing. She had a client meeting in Caldwell Heights at 9:30. Plenty of time. The streets leading into Caldwell Heights had a certain kind of cold beauty. Perfectly trimmed hedges, white fences straight as rulers, security cameras mounted on mailbox posts, on gate pillars, on corner lampposts. The kind of neighborhood where a slow-moving, unfamiliar car was enough for someone to pick up the phone and dial 911. Wynn knew that. She had driven this route a dozen times. She knew the speed limit. She knew her rights. She knew exactly why she was there and where she was going. What she didn't know was that someone had already called 911 to report a suspicious vehicle before she even turned onto that street. 2 blocks away, a patrol car sat idling in the shadow of a side street. Inside, Officer Dale Hartwell, 14 years on the force, known around the precinct by an unofficial reputation. He was the guy who didn't take lip from anyone. 3 prior complaints buried in his personnel file. All closed quietly. No investigation, no consequences. 2 involved black residents. 1 involved a Latino business owner. Hartwell saw Wynn's black SUV roll past. He ran the plate. Clean. No violations, no warrants. He pulled out and followed anyway. No reason, just habit. Wynn glanced into her rearview mirror and noticed the patrol car's headlights behind her. She wasn't worried. She hadn't done anything wrong. The jazz was still playing. Her hands were resting exactly where they were supposed to be on the wheel. She checked the clock. 9:08 p.m. I'll be home before 10, she thought. 6 minutes later, everything changed. The lights came on at 9:14 p.m. Blue, red, blue, red. flashing across the wet asphalt, bouncing off the white fences, flooding the inside of Wynn's SUV in cold, pulsing color. The radio on Hartwell's belt crackled once. A burst of static, then went quiet again. Wynn didn't panic. She didn't speed up. She did exactly what her father had drilled into her since she was 16 years old. Signal. Find the brightest stretch of road you can. Pull over slowly and completely. She eased the SUV to the curb beneath a street lamp, cut the engine, and placed both hands flat on the wheel. Fingers spread, visible. She had done this before. Not because she had ever done anything wrong, but because she was a black woman in America. She had learned young that how you move in these moments matters as much as whether you're innocent. She looked straight ahead and waited. Hartwell took his time getting out of the cruiser. She could hear his boots on the wet pavement. Slow, unhurried, deliberate. The walk of a man who understood that making someone wait was its own kind of power. The rain had thinned to a cold mist now. It caught in the beam of his flashlight as he approached. He didn't greet her, didn't introduce himself, didn't say good evening. He just materialized at her window, one hand resting on the roof of her car, body angled toward her, flashlight aimed straight at her face. He looked down at her the way someone looks at a problem they haven't decided how to handle yet. License, registration, and whatever's in that bag on the seat. Not a question, not a request. A list of demands delivered before she'd even been told why she was stopped. Wynn kept her voice even. Of course, officer. But could you first tell me what I was pulled over for? Hartwell's eyes didn't move from the leather portfolio on the passenger seat. Failure to maintain lane. She hadn't drifted. Not once. Her hands had been at 10 and 2 the entire drive. Every turn signaled, every stop complete. She knew it, and somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew he knew it, too. But she didn't argue. Not yet. She reached into the glove compartment slowly, announcing every movement before she made it the way you learn to, and produced a registration. Her license came from her wallet, handed over alongside it. Hartwell barely glanced at either document. His attention stayed fixed on the portfolio. What's in the bag? Confidential client documents, Wynn said. They're protected under attorney-client privilege. A pause. Hartwell tilted his head, just slightly. The way someone does when they've heard something that entertains them. You a lawyer? The word came out, riding a quiet smirk. Not a question so much as a verdict. Yes, licensed in the state of Georgia. He held that smirk for one more beat. Then he straightened up, tucked her documents under his arm without looking at them, and turned back toward his cruiser. Wynn sat still. The jazz had cut off when she stopped the engine. The only sounds now were the soft percussion of mist on her roof and the low crackle of Hartwell's radio drifting back from his cruiser. The street was empty in both directions. No other cars, no pedestrians, no witnesses. Just her, the lamppost, and the blue-red pulse of those lights painting everything in cold, alternating color. She breathed slowly in through the nose, out through the mouth. She waited. 3 minutes passed, then 4, then 6. She watched his silhouette behind the tinted windshield of the cruiser. He wasn't on his radio much. Wasn't typing into his computer. Just sitting, letting the clock run. Letting her sit in the cold with those lights still going. Still announcing to anyone who might drive past that something was wrong here. That this woman had been stopped. That she was being dealt with. When Hartwell finally came back, something in his posture had shifted. Looser, more casual. The kind of casual that isn't relaxed. It's decided. Step out of the vehicle, ma'am. Wynn didn't move immediately. May I ask why? We received a call. Suspicious vehicle in this area. He reached past her and pulled the door open himself. Not violently, but without asking. Without warning. As though the door and everything behind it already belonged to him. Out now. She stepped out onto the wet pavement. The night air hit her, cold, carrying the smell of cut grass and damp concrete. She stood beside the car, hands visible at her sides, shoulders back. Watched Hartwell begin circling the SUV. His flashlight swept methodically across each window, dragged along the interior. Paused on the back seat, paused longer on the portfolio in front. Officer, she said, steady, precise. On what probable cause are you conducting this inspection? He didn't answer. He finished his circuit and stopped at the passenger side, pressing his flashlight flat against the glass, the beam landing directly on the leather portfolio like a spotlight. He pointed at it. "I need to see what's in that briefcase." "Those are privileged legal documents," Wynne said. "You need a warrant to access them." Hartwell turned to look at her, flashlight still on, beam catching the side of his face. Jaw set, expression flat, eyes holding the particular weight of a man who wasn't used to being told no. "I don't need a warrant for an officer's safety search." One step toward her, then another. "Hand it over." Wynne held her ground, didn't step back, didn't blink. "With respect, officer, that is legally incorrect. Officer safety provisions do not override Fourth Amendment protections or Georgia State Bar privilege rules. I will not hand over those documents without a warrant." The silence between them pulled tight. Hartwell's jaw shifted, working on something he wasn't saying out loud. Then his face settled into something harder, colder. "You're making this a lot harder than it needs to be." "I'm exercising my constitutional rights," Wynne said. "That isn't making anything hard. That's the law." Something moved behind Hartwell's eyes then. Not embarrassment, not hesitation. Something closer to the flat mechanical calculation of a man deciding exactly how far he was prepared to push this and concluding the answer was further. He reached for his radio. "Unit 12 requesting backup at Meridian and Holloway. Suspicious vehicle stop. Occupant is being uncooperative." Wynne heard the word hit the air. Uncooperative. Felt something ignite deep in her chest. Not fear. Something quieter and colder than fear. She was standing still on a public road. She had handed over her documents without hesitation. She had spoken in complete, measured sentences. She had cited the relevant statutes by name. She had not raised her voice once. Uncooperative. She filed the word away carefully, the way you file something you know you're going to need later. For minutes later, a second cruiser came around the corner. Headlights cutting through the mist, tires slow on the wet road. Officer Ben Tillman stepped out. Younger than Hartwell by at least a decade, broad through the shoulders. He had the careful movements of someone who was still learning which situations to wade into and which ones to approach from a distance. He looked at Wynne first. Hands visible, standing calmly beside her car, blazer slightly damp from the mist, expression controlled. Then he looked at Hartwell. Hartwell didn't look back at him. He just tipped his head toward Wynne. "Keep her right there." Tillman's eyes moved between them one more time. He didn't walk toward Wynne, but he didn't say anything either. He just stood at the edge of the scene like a man, trying to figure out if the ground beneath him was solid. Hartwell moved to the passenger door of Wynne's SUV. Her voice came out clear and hard. "Officer Hartwell, you do not have legal authority to open that door without a warrant. I am formally objecting to this search, and I am stating that objection out loud for the record." Hartwell paused with his hand on the handle. Not because he was reconsidering, but the way a person pauses before doing something they've already decided to do. One last beat of stillness before the line gets crossed. He looked back at her over his shoulder. For the first time that entire stop, he smiled. Not a friendly smile, not an apologetic smile. The smile of a man who had done this before, who had never once been held accountable for it, and who had absolutely no reason to believe tonight was going to be any different. Then he pulled the door open. The door swung open, and Hartwell reached straight for the portfolio. No Sebastian, no gloves. Just his bare hands closing around the leather strap and dragging it out onto the hood of his cruiser like it was a bag of groceries he'd paid for himself. The documents inside shifted and compressed against each other as he dropped it down. A corner tab bent backward. A page slipped loose and caught the mist. Wynne watched him do it. She didn't lunge forward, didn't raise her voice. Instead, her right hand moved slowly into the front pocket of her blazer. Smooth, unhurried, the way you reach for something you've already decided you're going to need. Her thumb found the screen of her phone. One press, too. Voice memo, recording. She cleared her throat. Officer Dale Hartwell. She read his badge number clearly, each digit separate and deliberate. You are currently conducting a warrantless search of materials protected under attorney-client privilege. I am informing you that this interaction is being recorded. Hartwell looked up from the portfolio. His eyes dropped to her blazer pocket, then back to her face. Put the phone away. I have the legal right to record this interaction in the state of Georgia, Wynn said. I will not be putting it away. He held her gaze for one long second. Then he unzipped the portfolio. The documents inside were organized the way Wynn organized everything. Methodically, color-coded, each section tabbed and labeled. Case numbers, client names, strategy memos. Correspondence marked privileged and confidential in bold red text across the top of every single page. Hartwell flipped through them the way you flip through a magazine in a waiting room. Casually, carelessly, pages bending at the corners under his thumbs, tabs getting caught and twisted. The careful system she had spent years building treated like it meant absolutely nothing. Like it was nothing, like she was nothing. Officer Hartwell, Wynn said, her voice still controlled but tighter now. You are handling confidential legal materials belonging to active clients. Every page you're touching right now is protected under Georgia State Bar Rule 1.6 and federal privacy statutes. You are creating a record of violations with every second you continue. Hartwell pulled out a thick document and held it up toward his flashlight, tilting it like he was reading a menu. He read the client's full name aloud. Slowly, clearly. Not to her, to no one in particular. In the tone of a man who wanted her to understand that he could do this, that there was nothing she could do to stop him, and that he was enjoying it. What kind of case is this exactly? That is privileged information, Wynn said. You do not have the right. Sounds shady to me. He set it aside and reached for another page. The fury in Wynn's chest had become something physical. A heat that started behind her sternum and radiated outward through her arms and into her fingers. But her voice stayed even. Her posture stayed straight. She understood with cold and absolute clarity that every second he kept talking was another second her phone was capturing. Every word he said, every page he touched, every casual violation delivered with that flat, satisfied expression. He was building her case for her. He just didn't know it yet. Hartwell pulled out a second document and turned toward his radio. Dispatch, run a check on, and he read another client's name, clearly on an open channel, broadcasting protected information across an open police. Frequency to anyone listening. Wynn took one measured step forward. You just transmitted protected client information on an open police channel. That is a federal privacy violation. I am formally noting that for the record. Step back, Hartwell said. He didn't look up. I'm standing on a public street, she said. I have the right to stand here. He dropped the document back onto the pile and looked at her directly now. Fully, completely. With the tight and pressurized expression of a man who was used to people having backed down several minutes ago and was genuinely struggling to process why this one hadn't. You are violating the Fourth Amendment, Wynn said, her voice rising slightly, not from panic, but from the particular force of someone who needs every word to land clean and clear. You are violating Georgia State Bar confidentiality protections. You are violating federal privacy statutes. You are generating serious legal liability for yourself and for this department with every action you're taking right now. Hartwell set the documents down on the hood. He turned to face her fully, both hands loose at his sides. When he spoke, his voice had dropped to something quiet and deliberate. You keep talking like that, he said, and I will arrest you for obstruction of justice. Tillman was standing 6 feet to Wynn's left, arms crossed tight across his chest, eyes fixed on a point somewhere past her shoulder. The deliberate, careful unfocus of someone trying very hard not to be present in what was unfolding in front of him. Obstruction of justice, Wynn repeated, for citing legal statutes while standing still on a public street. For interfering with a lawful police investigation? This is not a lawful investigation. She said, you stopped me on a fabricated traffic violation. You opened my vehicle without probable cause or consent. You're currently handling privileged legal materials without a warrant. Not one action you have taken tonight has a lawful basis. And you are aware of that. The last sentence landed differently, quieter than the rest, more direct. Not an accusation delivered in anger. A fact delivered in the tone of someone who has spent enough time in courtrooms to recognize a bluff and has no intention of pretending otherwise. The mist thickened around them. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and went quiet. Hartwell walked toward her. He closed the distance slowly, stopping 18 inches in front of her face. Close enough that she could see the water droplets collected on the brim of his cap. Close enough that the intent was unmistakable. This was not proximity. This was pressure. The kind of intimidation that doesn't leave marks and doesn't get reported because it's just a man standing close to a woman on a dark street. And what exactly are you going to say about that? I think, he said softly, almost gently, that you need to stop talking now. I think, when said at exactly the same volume, that you need to state a lawful basis for this stop or release me. Those are your two options. Something broke open behind his eyes then. Not loudly. More like something that had been held under pressure for a long time, finally giving way. He turned to Tillman, sharp, sudden. Cuff her. The words hit the cold night air and sat there. Tillman didn't move. 2 seconds passed. 3. The rain tapped on the hood of the cruiser. The radio crackled faintly. Neither of those sounds filled the silence the way they needed to. Tillman. Hartwell's voice dropped lower, harder. I said cuff her right now. Tillman looked at Wynne. At the documents spread across the cruiser hood. At the phone outlined in her blazer pocket. At the dash cam mounted on her windshield. A detail Hartwell had walked past 3 times tonight without once registering. Tillman had noticed it. He wasn't sure what to do with that noticing, but he had noticed it. Dale. His voice came out quiet, careful, almost apologetic. She hasn't done anything. Hartwell turned to face him. What he said next was delivered in a voice too low and too controlled to reach Wynne's recording. But she watched Tillman's face as he heard it. Watched it go very still, very flat. The expression of a man absorbing something he didn't like and choosing in that moment to absorb it quietly. Tillman took one small step back. He wasn't going to comply, but he wasn't going to stop it either. And he knew that those two things were not the same. Hartwell turned back to Wynne. He unclipped the handcuffs from his belt. Wynne heard the metallic snap of the clip releasing and felt the cold mist on the back of her hands, on her forearms, on the side of her neck. She thought about Reginald, who always said, "Call me when you get there." She thought about Gloria, who was going to be furious tomorrow morning in the best possible way. She thought about the dash cam on her windshield, the dual-angle model with cloud sync, the one that had been uploading continuously to a server 200 miles away since the precise moment those blue-red lights first came on behind her. And she felt something settle in her chest. Quiet, certain, heavy as ballast. She looked at Hartwell, and she spoke. "If you place me under arrest, you will state the charge right now out loud on the record." He took one step toward her. "The charge," she said again, steady, immovable. "State it." He stopped 1 foot away, handcuffs open in his hand. The lights were still pulsing. The mist was still falling. The phone in her pocket recording every breath, every shift of gravel underfoot, every second of silence. He had no charge. They both knew it. And for the first time in 14 years of putting on that badge, Officer Dale Hartwell had nothing left to say. Hartwell stood there for 3 more seconds with those handcuffs open in his hand. Then he clipped them back onto his belt. He didn't explain why. Didn't acknowledge what had just happened. He simply gathered Wynne's documents off the hood of his cruiser. Not carefully, not apologetically, just efficiently. Shoved them back into the portfolio and dropped it onto her passenger seat like he was returning something that had never mattered. "You're free to go," he said. Flat, final. The voice of a man closing a door on something he intended to leave behind him. He turned back toward his cruiser without another word. Wynne stood on the wet pavement and watched him go. The mist was still falling. The lights were still going. Tillman was already back in his cruiser, engine running, staring straight ahead through the windshield at absolutely nothing. She got in her SUV, closed the door, sat in the sudden quiet. Her hands were steady on the wheel. She pulled out slowly, signaled perfectly, drove exactly at the speed limit until the flashing lights disappeared from her rearview mirror. Then she pulled in the first gas station she came to, parked under the fluorescent canopy, and sat very still. Her hands started shaking, not from fear, from the particular physical release of adrenaline that had nowhere left to go. She pressed them flat against her thighs and breathed. Slow, deliberate. The way you breathe when you need your body to understand that the danger has passed. Then she picked up her phone and called Reginald. He picked up on the first ring. She told him everything. Quietly, precisely, in the same methodical way she would recount facts to a client. When she finished, there was a brief silence on his end. Are you hurt? He asked. No. Do you have it all recorded? Audio on my phone, she said. And the dash cam has been running the entire time. Another pause. Then, quietly, the voice of a man who had spent 20 years on the federal bench and understood exactly what she had just said. Come home. We start tomorrow morning. She didn't sleep. By 5:30 a.m., the kitchen table was covered in printed documents, color-coded tabs, and 2 empty coffee cups. Reginald sat across from her in his reading glasses, working through the dash cam footage on his laptop. 22 uninterrupted minutes of high-definition video and audio. Front and rear angle, GPS stamped, time-stamped. Already backed up to 3 separate cloud locations before midnight. By 6 a.m., Wynn had drafted formal complaints to the precinct's Internal Affairs Division, the Georgia State Bar's Law Enforcement Liaison Office, and the ACLU of Georgia. By 7:30 a.m., she had a printed transcript of her phone audio recording. Every word, every pause, every badge number read aloud in her own clear voice. By 8:45 a.m., she had compiled a complete inventory of every document Hartwell had touched. Case numbers, client names, privilege classifications, the precise federal and state statutes violated by each individual action he had taken. At 9 a.m., she called Gloria Sutton. Gloria listened without interrupting. When Wynn finished, there was a silence of approximately 4 seconds. I'll meet you there in 45 minutes, Gloria said. They walked into the precinct together at 9:52 a.m., not as complainants, not as victims, as attorneys in full professional dress, carrying a document folder and a USB drive, requesting an immediate meeting with the precinct commander. The desk officer looked at them, looked at the folder, made a call. Captain Owen Pruitt came out to meet them himself. He was a measured man, mid-50s, careful posture. The kind of administrative composure that comes from decades of managing situations before they become crisis. He shook their hands, led them to his office, gestured to the chairs across from his desk with the polite efficiency of a man who was expecting something manageable. Wynn set the folder on his desk and opened it. She didn't speak immediately. She let him look. First, the printed audio transcript. 18 pages. Every exchange documented, every statute citation flagged in the margin. Hartwell's badge, number appearing on the first line of the first page. Second, the USB drive. 22 minutes of dash cam footage, dual angle, GPS stamped. Beginning at the precise moment Hartwell's lights activated and ending when Wynn's SUV pulled back onto the road. Third, the document inventory. Every file accessed, every client name Hartwell had read aloud. Every piece of information broadcast over open radio frequency. Pruitt read through the first 3 pages of the transcript in silence. Then Wynn placed the 4th document on top of the pile. Her credentials. Licensed Georgia attorney, COO of Brooks and Sutton Legal Consulting. Active bar membership in good standing for 17 years. Then the 5th. A single page, clean, straightforward. The current client roster of Brooks and Sutton. Partially redacted as required by privilege rules. With one name left fully visible at the top of the active accounts column. The city of Caldwell Heights. Pruitt looked at that page for a long time. The color didn't drain from his face dramatically. It was subtler than that. More like a slow, quiet dimming. The way a room changes when a cloud moves across the sun outside. He set the page down carefully. Precisely. The way you set something down when your hands need something deliberate to do. Officer Hartwell, Wynn said, conducted a warrantless search of confidential legal files belonging to his own employer. He broadcast protected information about his own municipality's legal matters on an open police frequency. He then threatened the attorney managing those files with arrest for citing the Constitution. Pruitt said nothing. I need you to call him in, Wynn said. Right now, while we're here, Pruitt picked up his phone. 4 minutes later, the door opened. Hartwell walked in with the easy confidence of a man who had been called into his commander's office before and always walked out the same way he walked in. He was already shaping his expression into something cooperative, something manageable, something that said this was all a misunderstanding that reasonable people could sort out quietly. Then he saw Wynne sitting across from Pruitt's desk, legal pad open, pen in hand, the USB drive sitting on the corner of the desk where he couldn't miss it. The folder opened to the page with his badge number on the first line. The easy confidence didn't leave his face all at once. It left the way air leaves a tire, gradually, steadily, until what remained wasn't a face that believed it was in control anymore. Wynne looked at him calmly. She didn't smile, didn't speak. Just looked at him the way a person looks at something they've been prepared for. Hartwell had spent 14 years counting on one thing: that whoever ended up on the other side of his badge wouldn't know how to fight back. He had chosen the wrong woman. Pruitt closed the door and gestured to the chair beside Wynne. Hartwell sat down slowly. His eyes moved from Pruitt to the folder to the USB drive to Wynne's legal pad. The rapid scan of a man trying to read a room he'd badly misread. He straightened, cleared his throat. "Captain, whatever she told you, I was responding to a suspicious vehicle call. Standard procedure for that type of stop." Pruitt said nothing. He looked at Wynne. Wynne picked up her phone and pressed play. Hartwell's own voice filled the room. "Because you look like you don't belong here. Your kind always got something to hide. Sounds shady to me." 90 seconds. Nobody spoke. Just Hartwell's voice coming out of that small speaker. Casual, contemptuous, utterly certain of itself. And the faint sound of rain and police radio underneath it. When it ended, the silence was a different kind than before. Hartwell's jaw was tight. He was staring at a fixed point on Pruitt's desk. That recording doesn't capture the full context of Officer Hartwell. Pruitt's voice was quiet and completely final. "Stop." Hartwell stopped. Pruitt set the USB drive down carefully. "Is there anything in this footage that contradicts what I just heard?" The muscle in Hartwell's jaw moved. He didn't answer, which was of course an answer. Pruitt looked at him with the exhausted clarity of a man who had managed other people's disasters for 20 years and could see exactly how this one would unfold. "Your badge and your firearm," Pruitt said. "On the desk now." "Captain." "Now." The badge came off first, then the holster. Two separate sounds on the desk. One flat, one heavier. Hartwell sat back with his arms crossed, his face arranged into something trying very hard to look like dignity. "You're suspended pending a full internal affairs investigation. You will be escorted from the building. You're not to contact any witness or anyone associated with this complaint." Pruitt paused. "Do you understand?" "Yeah," Hartwell said. Flat quiet. The single syllable of a man who had run out of larger words. Two officers appeared in the doorway. Hartwell stood, buttoned his jacket out of pure muscle memory, and walked to the door without looking at Wynne. He stopped for just 1 second, hand on the doorframe. Something crossed his face. Not remorse exactly, but the specific expression of a man beginning to understand the distance between where he stood now and where he'd stood 24 hours ago. Then he walked out. The footsteps faded. A door opened. A door closed. Pruitt turned to Wynne. "Miss Brooks, I want you to know that what happened last night, Captain Pruitt," Wynne said, not unkindly. "What happens next matters more than what you want me to know right now." Gloria opened a fresh legal pad beside her. Pruitt looked at them both, nodded once. "Then let's talk about what happens next." Across town, that same morning, Officer Ben Tillman walked voluntarily into a separate interview room before anyone called him and asked to give statement. He confirmed everything. Every exchange, every order. His account matched the recording with the precision of a man who had spent the night deciding that the truth was the only version of events he could live with. By noon, Brooks and Sutton had filed a formal civil rights complaint with the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. The Georgia State Bar had opened an inquiry into the attorney-client privilege breach, and the city of Caldwell Heights had retained outside counsel to assess its legal exposure. The institution that had failed her was now scrambling to get ahead of the story she was already telling. 72 hours after Wynne walked into that precinct, the dashcam footage went public. It wasn't a leak. It was a decision. Calculated, deliberate, timed to the hour. Brooks and Sutton had spent 3 days ensuring the legal record was fully established before a single frame reached the press. The complaints were filed, the evidence was logged, the chain of custody was airtight. Only then did Gloria Sutton place a call to Wadd's investigative desk. Anchor Sandra Hollis led the 6 p.m. broadcast with it that evening. A Georgia attorney was pulled over without cause, had her privileged client files rifled through on the hood of a police cruiser, and was then threatened with arrest for citing the United States Constitution. The clip ran for 4 minutes and 11 seconds. Unedited, unnarrated. Just the dash cam footage, dual angle, with the audio Wynn's phone had captured playing underneath it. By 9 p.m., it had 2 million views. By midnight, 4 million. By the following morning, 12 million. The hashtag Wynn was right appeared somewhere around hour 6 and never stopped trending. It ran nationally for 3 straight days. Polling and responses from law professors, sitting judges, former prosecutors, civil rights organizations, and ordinary people who had never heard of Caldwell Heights before that week. Now they couldn't stop watching those 4 minutes and 11 seconds on repeat. The comments weren't just outrage. They were recognition. Person after person writing some version of the same sentence. This happened to me. This happened to my father. This happened to my brother. And nobody had a dash cam. Sandra Hollis followed the initial broadcast with a 3-part investigative series. Part 2 aired 48 hours later. It was built around something her team had pulled from public records. Hartwell's personnel file. 3 prior complaints. 2 involving black residents. 1 involving a Latino business owner. All 3 closed internally. No investigation, no disciplinary action, no record of review. The pattern was now on television, laid out in plain language, with dates and case numbers and the names of the supervisors who had signed the closure forms. National civil rights organizations responded within hours. 3 separate groups filed formal requests for a systemic audit of Caldwell Heights PD's traffic stop data going back 5 years. A state legislative aide announced that 2 representatives were calling for a hearing. The precinct's public information line received so many calls it stopped functioning by the second day. District Attorney Thomas Waring filed criminal charges against Hartwell 10 days after the footage aired. 3 counts: unlawful search and seizure, official misconduct, unlawful access to privileged legal materials, each count carrying its own weight, its own sentencing range, its own paper trail leading directly back to 22 minutes of dashcam footage that Hartwell had never once thought to look for. Hartwell's privately retained attorney attempted to open plea negotiations the same week charges were filed. He contacted the DA's office with a proposal: reduced charges, no jail time, quiet resignation from the force. Waring's office declined. Brooks and Sutton filed a parallel civil suit against both Hartwell individually and the city of Caldwell Heights, citing Fourth Amendment violations, breach of attorney-client privilege, and a municipality's documented pattern of failing to investigate prior complaints against the same officer. The disciplinary board hearing was scheduled 6 weeks after the suspension. Hartwell's attorney argued in good faith. He argued that Hartwell had genuinely believed he had legal grounds for the stop and the search. He presented 14 years of service records, commendations, positive performance reviews, community policing awards. The board watched the dash cam footage in its entirety before he finished his opening statement. 22 minutes of silence in that room, broken only by the sound of Hartwell's voice on the recording and the occasional shift of someone in their chair. When the footage ended, the board chair asked Hartwell's attorney a single question. At what point in that recording does your client establish probable cause for the search? The attorney paused for a long time. The footage speaks for itself, he said finally. It did. DA Waring's team dismantled the traffic stop justification in under 20 minutes. The dash cam showed no lane deviation. Not once, not anywhere in the footage leading up to the stop. The original 911 dispatch log subpoenaed and entered into evidence showed that the caller had reported only a dark-colored vehicle driving slowly through the neighborhood. No erratic behavior. No violation described. No basis for a stop. The stop was pretextual from the first second. Everything that followed, it was built on nothing. The board deliberated for one day. Hartwell was found guilty on all 3 criminal counts. Sentenced to 18 months probation, 300 hours of community service, mandatory civil rights, and constitutional law education, and permanent decertification as a law enforcement officer in the state of Georgia, meaning he could never again hold a badge in this state. Not here, not in any capacity. His attorney said they would consider an appeal. They didn't file one. The civil case settled 4 weeks later. The city of Caldwell Heights agreed to terms that Wynn's team had insisted on from the beginning. An undisclosed financial settlement, mandatory body camera policy for all patrol officers, the establishment of an independent civilian oversight board with genuine investigative authority, and annual public audits of traffic stop data broken down by race and neighborhood. Real changes, structural ones, the kind that outlast the news cycle. Officer Ben Tillman received a formal commendation from Captain Pruitt for his refusal to comply with an unlawful order and for the honesty of his testimony. He requested a transfer to a different precinct shortly after. The request was approved without delay. The Georgia State Bar issued a formal public statement on the case. The first time in 11 years, it had commented directly on a law enforcement action. 3 law school professors announced within the same month that they were incorporating the case into their Fourth Amendment curriculum. Sandra Hollis closed her 3-part series with a line that got quoted more than anything else from the entire coverage. The camera didn't create the evidence. It just made sure the evidence survived. 14 years, 3 buried complaints, 1 bad stop on a rainy Tuesday night in a neighborhood where he had always felt untouchable. Dale Hartwell didn't just lose his job. He lost the thing he had built his entire career on. The absolute, unquestioned certainty that no one on the other side of his badge would ever know how to make him pay for it. 6 months after that rainy Tuesday night in Caldwell Heights, Wynn Brooks drove the same route again. Same road, same speed, same hands at 10 and 2. 3 new street lights have been installed along Meridian Drive. Brighter, wider coverage. The kind that leave nowhere for shadows to pool. A small thing, but Wynn noticed it. She noticed everything on that drive. She pulled up to her client's house, parked, and sat for a moment before going in. The neighborhood looked the same. White fences, trimmed hedges, security cameras on every corner. But something had shifted underneath the surface. Not visibly, not dramatically. Just the quiet structural shift that happens when a system is forced to account for itself. The Civilian Oversight Board had held its first official meeting 2 weeks earlier. 12 members, residents, legal advocates, community organizers, with real investigative authority, not merely advisory. The body camera policy had gone into effect the month before. Every patrol officer, every shift. No exceptions. The annual traffic stop audit was already scheduled. The data will be public. None of it happened because someone was feeling generous. It happened because Wynn Brooks stood on a wet road in the dark and refused to hand over a bag. Reginald made one public statement, just one. She did what she was trained to do. But no one should have to be trained to survive a traffic stop. Every 3rd Saturday morning, the conference room at Brooks and Sutton opens its doors to anyone stopped without cause who doesn't know what to do about it. No fee, no appointment, just attorneys, time, and the willingness to explain what your rights actually look like in practice. Not in a textbook, but on a dark road at 9 o'clock at night when someone is telling you to empty your bag. The dashcam footage now plays in Police Academy civil rights training in 3 Georgia counties. The same 22 minutes Hartwell never thought to look for, shown to new recruits as an example of exactly what not to do and exactly why it matters. Wynn never gave a press conference, never appeared on panel. She went back to work. That was the whole statement. One question worth sitting with. If you were standing in Wynn's position on that road that night, what would you have done? Would you have handed over those documents? And were the consequences Hartwell faced enough, or should the system have gone further? Drop in the comments. Every response matters. If this story landed, share it. Put it in front of someone who needs to hear it. Someone who doesn't know their rights yet. Someone who has been made to feel like they don't have any. And if this channel isn't already in your Subscriptions, now is the time. Hit that button. More stories like this one are coming. Hartwell permanently banned from law enforcement. That taken right in front of the woman he tried to silence. But here's what Wynn's story really taught me. First, Hartwell had 3 complaints in 14 years. All buried, all stayed closed. He kept going because nobody made him stop. Silence doesn't protect you from bad people. It protects bad people from consequences. Those 3 families woke up, the system failed them. Wynn won because she had a dash cam, a law degree, and a retired federal judge for a husband. Most people don't. That's the problem. Second, Hartwell seized confidential files belonging to the city that pays his salary. He was destroying his own employer's legal protection and didn't even know it. That's what unchecked power does. Makes you so careless you burn down your own house. Third, Wynn didn't cry, didn't beg. She cited every statute by name while her phone recorded every word. Turned his abuse into evidence. Her husband said it best. No one should have to be trained to survive a traffic stop. He's right. But until that changes, know your rights. Sometimes they're the only weapon you've got. So be honest. Do you know your rights during a traffic stop? Could you stay calm and say no to a badge and a gun in the dark? Most of us couldn't. That's why Wynn's story matters. Tell me in the comments what you would have done. Share this, like, and subscribe. And remember, they can't take what you refuse to give. This kind of situation happens every day. It's a harsh reality that we must acknowledge. We have to keep having these difficult conversations, no matter how uncomfortable they might be. Staying aware is your absolute best defense. Knowledge is power. Always remember that.